Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're logging in from. On behalf of the Outreach Committee, I'd like to welcome you to day three, session three of the Evergreen International Online Conference. We'd like to thank Mobius for sponsoring track one today and Equinox Open Library Initiative for sponsoring the closed captioning for the conference. And also a big thanks to Karen, who is our closed captioner on this track. If you are not familiar with Zoom's webinar controls, please take a moment to acquaint yourself with them. Feel free to use the Q&A or the chat for questions, or use the raise hand button to be called on to speak. The chat is also a good place to make comments and interact with other attendees, but do make sure that your drop down there in the chat section is set to all panelists and attendees, not just all panelists. This session is being recorded, and the recording will be available on the Evergreen Project's YouTube channel sometime after the conference. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Angela Simmons-Jones and Dixie Henning, who will be talking about reports that will help your patrons now. You can take it away.
Hello, this is Angela Simmons-Jones. Can everybody see my screen that I just shared?
Yes.
So I work at the Houston County Public Library System. I've been on staff since 2013. Before that, I was in the military for over 20 years in the Air Force. And so a lot of the job that I did in the Air Force was crossed over rather easily into the library system. And so this is one of the little projects that I've been working on within my county. So reports that will help your patrons now. The goal for using these monthly reports is to fulfill patron holds, reflect accurate item status, and ensure patron information is correct. We're going to go over 3 different areas: the item status reports, hold reports, which will break down into in transit too long, and hold shelf maintenance, which will break down a little bit further, and patron card checks. So monthly item status report, there's 2 versions that I use. There's the regular Evergreen report that I can run, and it will look at items from the previous month that went into certain item statuses that I select. And then there's the quick report version that shows every item that currently has that status. And it can go all the way back to when your system joined Evergreen. So this report is used to show any items based on the item status that I select that are not available to the patrons for checkout. I search for the item, verify the status, and check in the item so the status is available. I can't find it, I will mark it missing, and it will be scheduled for deletion. The item statuses that I focus on are bindery, cataloging, discard weed, in process, canceled transit, damaged, reserves, and temporarily unavailable. This is the data that I pull, that I request from Quick Report. And the next slide is the data that is pulled from just a regular report through Evergreen. So these are some samples of items that are in different statuses that I had previously listed. The edit dates, some of them can go back really far. I know something's not going to be cataloged for a year, or damaged for 6 years, or in process for many years. So, and these items are not available to the patron because they're not in available status. So they need to be found if possible. So the next report that we use here in Houston County is our new patron card checkup report. This report will show me how many new cards are issued each month, and it also lets me see all the information that was input into our system. One of the biggest problems that we've come across is the format used for the driver's license, the patron primary identification. If the incorrect format is used, you can create a duplicate card easily for that person. So I make sure that all of our computers at the circ desk have a little sample format. This little best practice format right here is what's on each monitor. So everybody can refer to it just in case they can't remember. In this report allows me to double check that. So these are a couple samples of what shows up. Someone used a state abbreviation, which it might be for Delaware, but that's not the accurate abbreviation. There's somebody that put in a space after the GA and the dash. And then one of our patrons, their information was entered just military ID. So this is the quick report version that I asked the computer to run. And this is the regular report version of data of raw data. Get that's all in there. So I browse the list, I get the number of new cards that were created for my monthly board report. And I go over and find any errors, and then I email the branch and let them know what correction needs to be made. Now, depending on how the patron filled in their little card, hopefully it has the state included in that primary identification field. So that could be added if it was missing, or simply a space taken out and the primary identification corrected. If the information is not on the patron's card that they filled out, I ask that the branch just put a note on the account so the next time the patron comes in, they can show their ID again, and that information can be added to their account. The next thing I'm going to go over is the hold reports. These reports will help you locate your items and get them moving. So we're going to go over the in transit too long and the hold shelf maintenance. So in transit too long, it's normally when our items are routed from one location to another, they're put in transit status. And when the item arrives at its destination, it must be checked in. If the item arrives at its destination but is not checked in, it will remain in transit status, even though the item is on a shelf or on the hold shelf. And to anyone viewing the catalog, that item is not available. So in transit too long, I recommend that the library check their transit list on a regular basis. I check ours monthly. You can even do it weekly. I know with libraries being closed right now, things are going to be in transit much longer as libraries, some of them are still closed and some of them are trying to catch up. But so once things are settled down, this is definitely something that libraries should want to take a look at in a few months, just in case anything did get stuck because of the quarantine. So in the staff client is where you go to get this report under administration, and then local administration and the transit list. So you go to the home screen. This is our Pine system, and it's the transit list. So like I said, and during normal times, items that are staying within the county should only be in transit for a few days. If they're going out of county or out of system, normally it would take an average of 3 to 5 weeks. So I use that criteria to sort the columns when this report is brought into Excel. And then I want to grab anything that's in transit too long. Then I ask both the receiving and the sending branches to check their shelves. And if the item is found, to check it in. If it's not found, the item is marked missing by the owning library. And so here are some samples. This first one, the Bats book, was going from one of my branches to another branch, which is out of county, back in October, and it was never checked in. The book does not belong to my library, so hopefully it belongs to this library, and hopefully it's on their shelf. So that's the important thing about both systems working the report, especially if it's your book, so you can have the correct status on it. So I check my shelf here in Houston County, and let them know if I find it. An ARL would check their shelf, and hopefully it's there, and then they would check it in. If neither of us find it, then it would be marked missing. So next we're going to go over the hold shelf maintenance list. This consists of 2 lists. I use the on hold shelf too long and the canceled holds. So normally you would check your hold shelf. You would go into Evergreen and browse the hold shelf. And you could see items that are canceled, but you can only see your hold shelf. You can't see your items that are on another library's hold shelf. So this report does that. So like I said, it's used to locate books that are sitting at an out-of-county hold shelf for too long and have not, this first one, and have not been canceled by the patron or the staff, but it's been on the hold shelf for too long. So this is a regular report, and I'll show you what this is, the raw data that is pulled. So enter the less than date of 2 months from today's date, because we want to be able to give the item enough time to be in transit, to be checked in, and then for the patron to be notified and have them have enough time to go and pick the item up. If the item is not picked up, then that additional time of it sitting on the hold shelf, it should appear on this report. So I always go back about 2 months. So I import the report into Excel. I email the pickup library and request that the patron be contacted to see if the item is still wanted. Then if they no longer want the item, then the hold request needs to be canceled, and then the item checked back in. So in the case of this is an item that belongs to Houston County. There's the owning library. It's sitting on a hold shelf at, I think it's a Live Oak Library since the end of January. And so I would email them and ask them to contact the patron and then either cancel the hold, hopefully, or the patron would come pick it up and check it out. If it's canceled, then it needs to be checked in and sent on its way. The next list that we're going to go over is the canceled holds at other locations. So like I said, if an item is on another library system's hold shelf and that the patron has canceled the item, it will not show up on the on hold shelf too long report. So this report is ran through regular Evergreen reports. This is the raw data. So this report's a little tricky. When you go into Evergreen reports, the first org ID that I put in will be for all libraries. And the second org ID that I put in is just my branches. And then I use the filter drop down to select HOU as the owning library. You always use the previous day's date. And then you want to double check to make sure that the item status hasn't changed. Say if you work the report a day or two later. So here are some samples. These items belong to Houston County. They were canceled. Like this one was canceled February 17th, but it's sitting at the shelf at this library location. So I'm going to email the pickup library and request that they check the item in. Since the patron has already canceled these holds, that action doesn't have to be taken. This also pushes that pickup library location to maybe browse their hold shelf and see if there's any other canceled items that belong to other libraries that can come off the shelf. So once the item is checked in, then it can be sent on its way. We have had instances in the past where the item cannot be found at the pickup location. And so that needs to be communicated back from the pickup location to the owning library so the item can be marked missing. Does anybody have any questions? I see where Diane said, it is great. The problem is that not all libraries manage the list or follow through when you ask them to mark something missing. And that's where I try to get the owning library to be the one that marks the item missing, just to make sure that, I'll stop my share. Just to make sure that the owning library is the one that then becomes responsible. It would show up on their item status report that they would run monthly for damaged, missing, lost, long overdue, claims returned. And then the item would be looked for again. And then it's up to the director to decide when the missing items would be deleted. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Looks like Catherine Nesbitt asked, what date range do you use for the transit list?
So for the transit list, go to my notes. So I run the report monthly, and then I go and I tell it, once I bring it into Excel. So I have to do it two different ways. So first I look at the items that are in transit between branches that are in the same county. Because like I said, those items should only be in transit for a few days. So I mark those in the Excel, usually with an X all the way to the right in a new column. So, and because then I'm going to go into the out of county version or the out of county list, and I'm going to go back 3 to 5 weeks. So it just depends too on holidays. I usually go back just a month, so the item has enough time to be in transit. So usually it's straight out 30 days from the date that I'm running the report is where I'm going to sort those columns.
We have a couple comments that I think just came to the panelists. So Diane Disbrow from Scenic Regional Library said that she starts the date that they migrated and ends with 3 weeks ago. And Catherine Reedner from Pioneer Library says our system uses from beginning to make sure we catch them all.
So with the different version of some of the reports, some of them I go in and I just tell them, show me the previous month, item statuses that went on items, in the past month. But I've noticed that when I run the quick report version, it goes all the way back to the beginning, and I find items that have a really old date. If you work the quick report version, or when you run the Evergreen report, going all the way back to the beginning of when you joined, and you work that report, you'll never have to work those dates again. So initially it might seem a little overwhelming because there might be a whole bunch of items going back. We joined in 2006, and our list is over 200,000 items for Georgia that are showing this kind of tricky status, that aren't available to the patron. That's going to seem overwhelming at first, but literally they only have to be marked or worked once, and then updated if the items are found and checked in and are now available. That will fall off that list. And then after that, it's just maintaining the reports every month. I also go back just to be sure, depending on how busy we are and how many volunteers we have. I'll go back and run it a year back and see, is there anything that I missed, or and they can take a look for it and we can get the status updated. Yeah. So I think someone said, I never thought about checking the hold shelf of other libraries. Brilliant. So I try to be really polite. I know different libraries have a different length of time that they keep books on their shelf. Depending on how popular the book is, I might, if it's like Where the Crawdads Sing, I'm gonna keep an eye on it and try to get it back in circulation a little bit faster. And this helps overall with our patrons getting their holds faster and making sure that items don't get stuck on other hold library shelves. Yep. And our Pines policy does say for 7 working days. And I know that we've had a little bit of leeway at times when you have a patron that comes in on certain days of the week, or they have a pretty good stack, and well, they're going to be coming in, and one of these books is over the 7 days. But the ones that I'm focusing on this list are ones that are well over 7 working days on the shelf. Like I said, right now with libraries still being closed, I'm not pushing it as hard. I worked the list 2 days ago. I have like a standard email that I use, trying to be really polite and explain why I'm asking for my item back. Initially, when I first started working this report, there were a lot of items that were hung up on other library shelves. And we were able to find some problems that were going on at other libraries, and where items were disappearing off their hold shelf. And hopefully that's been resolved now. And it just, keeping the books moving is my goal. Are there any other questions? That if anybody wants to see the raw data for each report, I can send that. My email is ajones@houpl.org. I've also, I created a training book here in my office that I can refer to, because each report's ran a little bit different. So that's good thing for me to refer to, as well as these slides. Okay. And so Megan and Billy. Yes. All these slides will be available. This recording will be available. Any other questions?
Seeing none. Oh, go ahead.
If anybody wants, like Meg and Billy, if you want to send me an email to ajones@houpl.org, I can send you the slideshow or the specific raw data that you want. Okay.
All right, thank you, Angela, for that really informative presentation. I'm sure that's going to be really helpful. And thank you everyone for attending. There's still plenty of time before the next session, and we keep the recording going, so feel free to continue in the chat, interacting with each other. And if you are attending the next session on this panel, batches, baskets, book bags, and so forth, that will be starting at 3 o'clock Eastern. So 2 o'clock here and noon Pacific time. So feel free to stick around, or you can log out and go to the other track. So thank you again for coming, and thank you, Angela, and we'll see you all later.